So we're going to be moving into layer 3 interface configuration, and this is the topology that we're going to be using. We have two Nexus switches, Nexus 1 and Nexus 2, with a connection between them, and then there's two routers which they're going to act as hosts, but they're two Cisco routers, R1 and R2. And I have these interfaces already, I have these devices already open, so let's start with the configuration. And the most of the configuration is going to be done on Nexus 1. Oh, let's just log in, sorry, admin, they're blank. So the first thing that you can do when you're doing the configurations, let me just put a bit of this config on here. So terminal, color, persist, username and password. Guys, I have a request from you. If you're enjoying the free content, I'm looking to increase my subscriber count to 4,000 subscribers by June. But I can only do that if you give me the play special. Do you want to know what the play special is? Press like and subscribe. Okay, back to the video. And also I will change the host name. So switch name, Nexus 1. And the last parameter is the boot parameter. Boot Nexus, boot flash, Nexus .9.3.3.bin. Alright, that might take some time to come up. So the first thing that I'm going to configure with the interface, we're going to have a look at the interfaces. We're going to see what the majority of interfaces are when they come up on the Nexus. Then we're going to look at configuring a description. I think that's the best place to start off. So let me save that configuration and do a fast forward. That took a bit longer than I thought. The first thing to do is if I do a show interface brief. Now these are the interfaces that we can configure, and the first thing that I notice is that all of the interfaces are showing as being routed. Now, if we wanted to make it like a layer 2 switch, what we could do is say system default, and we can make these interfaces as switch ports. So now if I do a show interface brief, you see that all the ports have changed from being routed to access. That means if we were going to do any layer 3 configuration, now we have to run the no switch port command. Let's have a look at the topology again. So we're going to do the configuration between Nexus 1 and Nexus 2, which is interface E1/1. The first thing I want to do is say interface E1/1. I'm going to say no switch port. Let's try the configuration without the no switch port first. So the first thing we're going to say is the description of the interface is from connection to Nexus 2, and the description is really helpful because it will help to configure the interface with a unique name, and this can be done for each interface so you know exactly what this interface is doing or where it's going. Okay, this needs to be spaced out properly. So the first thing is this, and then I need to put a space here, connection to Nexus 2. And then we could also change the MTU. So the default MTU, which is the maximum transmission unit, is 1500 bytes. And this can be changed per link with the MTU command, but it must be configured at both ends. So if I say MTU, instead of being 1500, if I make this, 2000, MTU can only be default or system jumbo MTU. Okay, so I would have to make these jumbo frames, and what we can do, we can enable jumbo frames, which are Ethernet frames that have a payload which is bigger than 1500 bytes. So every time a switch has to process a frame, the switch uses resources. So if you can reduce the number of frames the switch needs to process by increasing the frame size, then theoretically you can improve the efficiency of the switch. And what we can do is say system jumbo MTU, and let's make this 9,000 for jumbo frames. So now every interface on the switch is enabled to use jumbo MTUs. Another thing we can do is on an interface. So if we go back into interface 1/1, we can enable the bandwidth and the delay. Now the bandwidth command is used by protocols like EIGRP, which uses the minimum path bandwidth to determine like the routing metric. And if we think of delay as being how long it takes to put the frame on a wire, that while the delay parameter is also used by EIGRP in its metric calculation. It's also used with sub interfaces which will inherit the delay from the main interface. So I could say something like bandwidth of 1 million, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and delay of 10,000. All right, now we're going to actually get into the layer 3 configuration, but it shouldn't work because the default is as an access port. So if I say 192.168.0.1/24, we can see that we've come up with an error. And the reason is because we need to put in the no switch port command to make it a rooted port. Now, if we put that exact same command in, you can see that it will take that command. But I'm going to actually take that command off because I want this to be a sub interface. So if I up arrow and then say Control A to go to the front of the line and say no IP address. Oh, I don't want that. Let's say exit. Interface E1/1. No IP address. All right. And what we could do a show run for that interface to see the configuration under that interface. E1/1. And we can see we've got no switch port, a delay of 10,000 and a bandwidth of 1 million. Now to bring this interface up, if I say show IP interface brief, we shouldn't see anything actually. No, but if I say show interface brief, when we're looking for E1/1, we can see that it's administratively down. Now to bring that up, we need to run a no shut under that interface. Now we can see that the interface is a rooted port and it is up. Okay. Now the reason I've taken off that configuration is because I'm going to make it a sub interface. So if I go back and look on our topology, we can see that these two devices, R1 and R2, if we pretend that Nexus 2 is just purely a layer 2 switch. Now, for R1 to be able to communicate to R2 through a VLAN, it would have to use something called router on a stick. And with router on a stick, if R1 is using an IP address of 10.1.1.1 and R2 is using an IP address of 15.0.0.2, they will come up on this VLAN, which is assigned by Nexus 2, and it will come to Nexus 1. Now, Nexus 1 will only be able to, if we were just using one interface, it will only be able to assign one IP address. So which one should it do? Should it use the 10 subnet or should it use the 15 subnet? It's a problem. But if we were to divide up that actual interface, which I'm going to show you next, then we could put both of them and we could use Nexus 1 as the gateway for R1 and R2's IP addressing. And that's what I'm going to do now. And obviously I have to do the configuration on the other devices, but I will show it you on the Nexus 1 first. So if I say exit here, and I say interface E1/1, and then I'll say .10, and this will mean for me that R1 will be in VLAN 10 and R2 will be in VLAN 20. Now I say encapsulation .1Q for VLAN 10. And I can say IP address will be 10.1.1.10/24. And I have to make sure I also bring up the sub interface. And I'll do that for the other one as well. So interface E1/1 .20 this time. Just up arrow a couple of times. Encapsulation .1Q. Make that in VLAN 20. The IP address will be 15.0.0.1 .0.0.20/24 and bring that interface up. And if I say copy, run, start, now I will do the configuration for the others, and we should be able to, by the time I'm finished, ping from R1, which is in VLAN 10, should be able to ping R2, which is in VLAN 20. So let's jump onto our Nexus 2. Oh, all of that configuration was on Nexus 2. All right, so what I need to do is show run interface. Let me shut these interfaces down, the sub interfaces. And how am I going to save this now? So if I say shut, and on interface E1/1.10, I say shut. Then I do a show run interface E1/1.10. Let me take this configuration and put that on Nexus 1. And also this. You really should make sure of the interfaces that you're working on. Let me know, shut that as well. All right, that's good. They're both up. Now I'm going to change the switch name to Nexus 1. Username, admin, password, admin. Let me save that. Copy RS. Let me change it on here. So host name is now going to be Nexus 2. And I'll say default interface E1/1. And for the sub interfaces, all right, show run. No, not show run. Let me do show IP interface brief. Show int brief. Okay, it looks like those sub interfaces have gone from Nexus 2. So show run interface E1/1, E1/10. Okay, good. So now we've done the configuration on R1, taking it over. Show run interface E1/1, E1.10, E1.20. Now we can do the configuration on Nexus 2, and the E1 going up to Nexus 2 should actually be a trunk port. So if I say interface E1/1 switch port, which it already is, and switch port mode trunk, no, shut that interface. And let's make some VLAN. So VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. Make sure it's taken those VLANs. Show VLAN brief. It has, yes. And then we're going to put the interfaces into that VLAN. So let's look at the topology again. VLAN 1/5 in VLAN 10 and 1/6 in VLAN 20. Interface E1/5 and 6. Let's just do it like this. Make it a range command. Switch port, which they already are. Switch port mode access. Okay, now for interface, let's no shut them as well. That's something that we could do on both. Now for interface E1/5, switch port access VLAN 10. And for interface E1/6, VLAN 20. That should be it for our configuration on Nexus 2. Now we could go over to the devices and do that configuration. Let me just find out the IP addresses again. So 10.1.1.10. Okay, so on R1 I've had as R2 and R2 as R2. So let's change that host name. All confused here. So host name is R1. Yeah, interface G is 0/0. IP address of 10.1.1.1/24. No, shut the interface. And then do a default route going up to our gateway. 0.0.0.0, 0.0.0.0 goes to 15. Oh no, goes to 10.1.1.10. Save that. Let's make sure we can ping the sub interface on Nexus 1. Do ping 10.1.1.10. That's excellent. Now we need to do the same configuration on R2. Conf T interface G 0/0. IP address 15.1. Is it 0? 15.0.0.2. Let's have a look. Yes, it is. /24. No, shut the interface and then do a default route. IP route to get to anywhere. Go to 15.0.0.20. Do WR. So we should be able to ping everything now. So do ping 15.0.0.20, which is successful, and also do ping 10.1.1.1, repeat 10. And this is going over to R1. There we go. Successful.